April 8, 1945, 11:23 a.m., somewhere between Weser and Nordheim, Germany. Obergefreiter Hans Müller pressed his eye against the periscope of his Panther tank, scanning the rubble-choked street ahead. The engine idled with that familiar deep rumble that had carried him through 3 years of war. Through the optics, he caught movement, a silhouette emerging from behind a collapsed building. The turret was massive, disproportionate. The gun barrel extended impossibly long and thick. This wasn't a Sherman. Müller's hand moved instinctively to the intercom switch. His voice, trained to remain calm under fire, carried only the slightest tremor. Achtung, unknown American tank, heavy gun. Range 400 meters. The gunner beside him, Gefreiter Klaus Zimmermann, had already begun traversing the turret. They had destroyed 17 Allied tanks since Normandy, Shermans mostly. A few Cromwells, once, memorably, a Churchill. Every American tank they'd faced had the same fatal weakness: insufficient firepower at range. The mathematical certainty had sustained them through retreats, through dwindling fuel supplies, through the knowledge that Germany was losing. Their Panther's 88mm gun could kill anything the Americans fielded before it could kill them. But the mathematics were about to change in ways that would shatter not just metal and flesh, but the fundamental assumptions that had kept German tank crews fighting against impossible odds. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The story of what German tankers never fully understood about the M26 Pershing begins not with a single captured tank, but with a broader truth about the final collapse of the Third Reich. It's a story about knowledge denied, about technological superiority arriving too late to be properly comprehended, and about the psychological impact of facing a weapon you never expected and would never fully evaluate. The Americans called it the Pershing. The Germans, in the brief encounters they had with it, called it many things, but they never had the opportunity to truly understand what it represented. By early 1945, German tank doctrine rested on foundations that had been poured in blood and victory since 1942. The mathematical superiority of German heavy tanks wasn't propaganda. It was demonstrable battlefield reality verified in thousands of engagements across 3 continents. The Tiger I, introduced at Leningrad in August 1942, established parameters that seemed to violate the rules of armored warfare. Its 88mm KK 36 liters, 56 gun could penetrate 100mm of armor at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters. The frontal armor measured 100mm on the hull, 120mm on the turret face. Against the standard American M4 Sherman with its 75mm M3 gun, the disparity was crushing. The Sherman's main gun could only penetrate the Tiger's frontal armor at ranges under 100 meters, and even then only with specialized ammunition and perfect shot placement. A Tiger could engage and destroy Shermans from distances where American return fire was physically impossible. This wasn't battlefield rumor or exaggeration, it was geometric and metallurgical fact. American tank crews developed what they called Tiger fever, a psychological condition where any German tank became a tiger in stressed perception, where the mere possibility of facing one created tactical paralysis. The Panther, introduced in 1943, compounded German advantages. Weighing 45 tons with sloped frontal armor 80mm thick at 55 degrees equivalent to 140mm of vertical armor, it was effectively immune to standard Sherman fire at normal combat ranges. Its 75mm KK 42 liters, 70 gun fired at higher velocities than the Tiger's 88. capable of penetrating 138 millimeters of armor at 1,000 meters. By late 1944, German tank crews had developed standard tactics exploiting this superiority. Position at maximum range, use superior optics to acquire targets first, engage and destroy enemy armor before it could close to threatening distances. A single Panther could hold defensive positions against entire armored companies. The psychological advantage extended beyond mere statistics. German heavy tank crews painted kill rings on their gun barrels like fighter aces. They developed an almost mystical confidence in their machines. Veterans of Schwer Panzerabteilung 503 described the sensation of invulnerability that came with operating Tigers and Panthers. The feeling wasn't irrational. It was based on consistent battlefield experience, where their armor deflected enemy fire, while their guns destroyed opponents at will. This confidence became a critical component of German resistance in the war's final months. As fuel supplies dwindled, as air superiority vanished, as infantry divisions melted away, German tank crews maintained fighting spirit partly through faith in technological superiority. The doctrinal framework supporting this confidence was comprehensive. German tank training emphasized long-range gunnery, superior optics usage, and defensive positioning. Crews learned to identify enemy tanks by silhouette at extreme ranges. Recognition manuals detailed every Allied tank type: the high-riding Sherman with its vulnerable vertical armor, the Stuart light tank with its inadequate 37mm gun, even the rare jumbo Sherman with its improved armor that still couldn't threaten German heavy tanks beyond 500 meters. German intelligence tracked American tank production with reasonable accuracy. They knew the Sherman was the backbone of American armored forces. They knew its specifications, its weaknesses, its tactical employment. What German intelligence failed to track, what German tank crews would never adequately learn, was that American engineers had been working since September 1942 on something fundamentally different. The journey to what would become the M26 Pershing began with a bitter American realization in North Africa and Italy. The Sherman, designed in 1941 when the most dangerous German tank was the Panzer IV with its short 75mm gun, was catastrophically outclassed by 1943. American tank crews were dying in numbers that shocked commanders who had believed in the Sherman's adequacy. After-action reports from Tunisia painted a grim picture. German tanks could engage American armor at ranges where return fire was impossible. American tank destroyers with 90mm guns showed promise, but their open-topped turrets made them vulnerable. What was needed was a tank, a fully armored, mobile platform, mounting a gun capable of penetrating German heavy armor at combat ranges. The T-26 project, initiated in September 1942, represented American heavy tank development's convergence on a single design philosophy. Previous efforts, the T-20, T-23, T-25 series, had explored various combinations of armor, armament, and mobility. The T-26 incorporated lessons from all previous experiments. The design featured cast armor construction with frontal protection up to 102 mm thick. The turret, massive and angular, housed the 90mm M3 gun, the same weapon, proving effective in the M36 tank destroyer. The suspension used a torsion bar system providing superior cross-country mobility compared to the Sherman's vertical volute spring suspension. But development was plagued by opposition from within the American military establishment. General Leslie McNair, commanding Army, Ground Forces, opposed heavy tank production. His doctrine emphasized tank destroyers lighter, faster, cheaper vehicles, designed specifically for anti-tank work. McNair argued that tanks should support infantry, not fight other tanks. When tanks did encounter enemy armor, specialized tank destroyers should handle them. This philosophy had merit in theory, but collapsed against German tactical reality. German tanks didn't conveniently separate themselves from infantry support. They integrated into defensive systems where American tanks had to fight them directly. The debate consumed months. American tank production, organized around Sherman manufacturing at multiple facilities, resisted retooling for a new design. Fisher Body Division at Grand Blanc Arsenal in Michigan, Chrysler's Detroit Tank Arsenal, and other contractors had streamlined Sherman production to remarkable efficiency. By 1944, American plants produced Shermans at rates exceeding 2,000 per month. Switching to Pershing production meant disrupting this output, retraining workers, redesigning supply chains. The institutional resistance was enormous. Meanwhile, American tank crews continued dying in their Shermans. The Battle of the Bulge in December 1944 finally forced the issue. German Panzer forces, concentrated for the Ardennes offensive, included approximately 400 Panther tanks, plus significant numbers of Tiger IIs and assault guns. American armored units, equipped almost entirely with Shermans, suffered devastating losses. Individual Shermans required numerical superiority of 4 or 5 to 1 to successfully engage a single Panther, and even then casualties were severe. After-action reports made the inadequacy undeniable. On December 22, 1944, the T-26E3, still not officially designated as the M26 Pershing, received deployment orders to Europe. The first 20 tanks were loaded under conditions of unprecedented secrecy. Workers at Fisher Tank Arsenal had been told they were building improved Sherman variants. Components were manufactured at separate facilities to prevent anyone from understanding the complete design. When the first Pershings shipped from New York Harbor in January 1945, they were listed on manifests as heavy maintenance equipment and covered with tarps. The secrecy served multiple purposes. American commanders wanted tactical surprise. German crews encountering Pershings for the first time would have no recognition training, no tactical doctrine for engagement. But there was also concern about morale. If American tank crews learned that their command had knowingly sent them into battle in inadequate equipment while superior tanks existed in development, the psychological impact could be devastating. The Pershing program became classified not just from the enemy, but from America's own frontline forces. The 90mm M3 gun represented the culmination of American anti-tank weapon development during World War II. Originally designed as an anti-aircraft weapon, the 90mm family had proven remarkably adaptable to ground combat roles. The M3 variant, specifically designed for tank mounting, fired a 24-pound armor-piercing round at muzzle velocities exceeding 2,800 feet per second. The standard M82 APC armor-piercing capped round could penetrate 119 millimeters of armor at 500 yards, sufficient to punch through a Tiger I's frontal armor at typical combat ranges. The T-30E16 HVAP high-velocity armor-piercing round, using a tungsten carbide core, could penetrate 221 millimeters at the same distance, enough to threaten even the King Tiger's massive frontal plate. The gun's physical dimensions reflected its power. The barrel extended over 15 feet from the breech face, giving the Pershing its distinctive long-snouted appearance. The recoil mechanism, housed in the turret, had to manage forces far exceeding anything in the Sherman. The entire weapon system weighed approximately 4,000 pounds, requiring a turret design substantially larger than anything previously mounted on American tanks. This necessitated the Pershing's characteristic oversized turret, which German tank crews would find so distinctive when they first encountered it. The ammunition loadout reflected American tactical philosophy. Each Pershing carried 70 rounds of 90mm ammunition, divided between armor-piercing and high-explosive shells. Compare this to the Tiger I's 92 rounds of 88mm ammunition, or the Panther's 82 rounds of 75mm. The Americans prioritized a balanced load for engaging both armor and infantry targets. The high-explosive rounds, weighing 23.5 pounds with approximately 2 pounds of explosive filler, proved devastating against field fortifications and infantry positions. This versatility would distinguish the Pershing from German heavy tanks, which were optimized primarily for anti-tank work. The fire control system incorporated lessons from 3 years of American combat experience. The gunner's periscope provided magnification options of 4 power and 8 power, comparable to German optics. But the Americans added a key innovation, a fully stabilized gun mounting that allowed firing while moving. German tanks, for all their superiority in armor and firepower, required stationary firing positions for accurate long-range shots. The Pershing's stabilization system, while not perfect, allowed engagement while in motion at speeds up to 15 miles per hour. This seemingly minor technical detail would prove critical in the fluid combat of Germany's collapse. The armor protection represented American compromise between mobility and survivability. The frontal glacis measured 102 millimeters thick at 46 degrees, equivalent to approximately 143 millimeters of vertical armor. The turret front, at 114 millimeters, could resist German 75mm guns at most combat ranges and stood a reasonable chance against 88mm fire at moderate distances. Side armor measured 76 millimeters on the hull, adequate against most German anti-tank guns but vulnerable to the larger weapons. The design philosophy accepted that no tank could be invulnerable while remaining mobile. The Pershing's 46-ton weight already pushed the limits of bridge capacity and transportation logistics. The power plant, a Ford GAF 8-cylinder gasoline engine producing approximately 500 horsepower, provided adequate but not spectacular performance. Maximum road speed reached 25 miles per hour, respectable for a heavy tank. Cross-country mobility, hampered by the torque bar suspension's occasional reliability issues, was acceptable but inferior to the Panther's interleaved roadwheel system. The Americans prioritized mechanical reliability over ultimate performance. The Ford engine, derived from aircraft engine designs, used readily available components that American maintenance crews understood. This pragmatic approach to engineering would prove crucial in sustained operations. By February 1945, when the first Pershings entered combat, the production infrastructure supporting them represented American industrial capacity at its peak. Fisher Body had converted entire automobile production lines to tank manufacturing in months, a feat German industry never achieved. The Detroit arsenal alone exceeded much of Germany's total tank production capability. Beyond the Pershings already in Europe, hundreds more were in various stages of production. American tank design hadn't just caught up to German capabilities, it had potentially surpassed them while maintaining overwhelming production advantages. But German tank crews, fighting in the ruins of the Reich, would never learn these details. They would encounter Pershings in brief, violent engagements where survival took precedence over analysis. They would see the results of the 90mm gun their Panthers and Tigers burning, armor penetrated at ranges they thought safe. But they would never capture a Pershing intact. They would never conduct the methodical technical evaluation that might have revealed just how thoroughly American engineering had evolved. The knowledge gap would remain until the war's end, leaving German tankers to die wondering what, exactly, had killed them. The first 20 M26 Pershings arrived at Antwerp harbour on January 15, 1945, still officially designated as T-26E3S, still shrouded in secrecy that extended from loading docks in New York to frontline positions in Germany. Major General Gladion M. Barnes, Chief of Research and Development for Army Ordnance, personally led a specialized team called the Zebra Mission to support their deployment. The mission's purpose extended beyond simple logistics. These tanks were still developmental, still experiencing teething problems that required immediate engineering support in combat conditions. The tanks were divided equally between the 3rd and 9th Armoured Divisions, both operating under 1st Army Command. Crew selection was meticulous. Tank commanders chosen for Pershing assignment had proven combat records, typically with multiple tank kills and demonstrated tactical ability. Gunners were selected for marksmanship scores and mechanical aptitude. Loaders needed physical strength to handle the 90mm ammunition's weight. Drivers required experience with heavy vehicles and demonstrated mechanical sympathy. Each crew underwent specialized training at a facility near Aachen, Germany, learning the Pershing's characteristics, its quirks, its capabilities that exceeded anything they'd previously operated. The psychological impact on these crews was complex. Relief dominated initial reactions finally, a tank that could fight German heavy armor on equal or superior terms. But this relief carried undertones of bitter realization. How many American tankers had died in Shermans because this machine had been delayed? The question went unasked in official reports but permeated informal conversation. Crew members who'd lost friends in Sherman brew-ups, the slang term for Sherman ammunition fires that made them death traps, looked at the Pershing's thicker armor and more powerful gun with emotions mixing gratitude and grief. February 25, 1945. 3rd Armored Division, advancing through the Ruhr River sector near Elsdorf, Germany. The morning was cold, temperatures hovering just above freezing, the sky overcast with clouds that threatened snow. The Pershing, designated as Number 40, commanded by Sergeant Nicholas Mashlonik, moved forward with a Sherman platoon providing security. Mashlonik, a veteran with 15 tank kills from Normandy, had received his Pershing only days before. The crew was still learning the tank's handling characteristics, still adjusting to the turret's size and the gun's power. At approximately 0930 hours, the Pershing was overwatching a roadblock when a Tiger I, concealed in a building approximately 100 yards distant, opened fire. The ambush was perfectly executed German doctrine at its finest. The first round struck the turret, penetrating through the coaxial machine gun port. The armor-piercing shot passed through the mantlet's thinnest point, a design weakness the Germans had somehow identified and exploited. Gunner Corporal John de Riggy and loader Private Alexander Sesser died instantly. The second shot hit the main gun barrel, detonating the chambered round and distorting the barrel. The third shot missed as driver-technician 5th grade Ray Payne threw the Pershing into reverse, backing away, before additional fire could finish them. The crew bailed out. Mashlonik, wounded but mobile, rallied his surviving crew members and organized their evacuation. The Pershing, designated Fireball in accordance with American naming conventions, sat abandoned in Elsdorf's streets. For approximately 6 hours, it remained in no man's land, too exposed for American recovery, but also inaccessible to German forces who lacked the heavy recovery vehicles needed to tow a 46-ton tank under fire. This was Germany's closest opportunity to capture an intact Pershing. If the Wehrmacht had possessed the resources, a heavy recovery vehicle, air cover, time they might have towed Fireball to a rear area testing facility. German engineers might have conducted the same thorough evaluation they'd performed on captured Shermans, T-34 seconds, and Churchill tanks throughout the war. They might have disassembled the 90mm gun, analyzed the ammunition, measured the armor properties, tested the engine characteristics. The intelligence gathered might have influenced German tactical doctrine in the war's final weeks, might have led to modified engagement procedures that could have inflicted additional casualties on American armored forces. But Germany in February 1945 lacked the resources for such operations. The Tiger that had knocked out Fireball was itself operating with minimal support, running on dwindling fuel supplies, its crew aware that ammunition resupply was uncertain. When American forces counterattacked that afternoon, supported by artillery and airstrikes, the German tank withdrew. By evening, American recovery crews had reached the Fireball under covering fire. The tank was salvaged, towed to a maintenance area, and eventually returned to combat with a replaced gun barrel and repaired turret. The opportunity to evaluate a captured Pershing had passed. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The famous encounter at Cologne Cathedral on March 6, 1945, provided German tank crews with their most direct confrontation with Pershing capabilities. But even this engagement was too brief for comprehension. The incident occurred as 3rd Armoured Division forces pushed into Cologne's city centre. A Panther from Panzer Brigade 106, commanded by Oberleutnant Wilhelm Bartelborth, had positioned itself in an intersection near the cathedral, a textbook defensive ambush point with good fields of fire and nearby withdrawal routes. At approximately 3:47 p.m., the Panther engaged an advancing Sherman, destroying it with a single shot that killed 3 crew members. The German crew, experienced and tactically sound, immediately began traversing to engage additional targets. But Pershing Eagle 7, commanded by Sergeant Robert Early with Corporal Clarence Smoyer as gunner, was advancing on a parallel street. Smoyer, who had trained extensively with the Pershing's fire controls, identified the Panther through his periscope as it rotated to face the Sherman's position. The geometry favored the Americans. The Panther's side armor, 70mm thick, was exposed as it turned. Smoyer fired. The 90mm armor-piercing round struck the Panther's turret ring, where armor was thinnest. The penetration was catastrophic. The shell passed through the crew compartment, detonating stored ammunition. The Panther's interior became an inferno. Bartelborth and 1 other crew member were killed instantly. 2 additional crew members died in the fire. 1 crew member escaped. The entire engagement lasted perhaps 15 seconds. From the Panther crew's perspective, they had no time to analyze what killed them. They likely never identified the Pershing as distinct from a Sherman. The sole survivor, severely burned, was evacuated to a German field hospital, where he died the following day, without providing detailed after-action intelligence. The Americans, meanwhile, had demonstrated what the Pershing could do at close range against German armor. But the engagement's brevity meant that neither side fully comprehended the broader implications. German intelligence officers, analyzing radio intercepts and survivor reports in the following days, began noting references to a new American tank type. Reports mentioned unusually large turrets, longer gun barrels, more powerful reports from American tank guns. But these fragmentary observations never coalesced into comprehensive understanding. German intelligence agencies in March 1945 were collapsing along with the Reich itself. Intelligence analysis requires time, resources, and institutional continuity that no longer exists. The German military's systematic approach to evaluating captured enemy equipment had been one of the Wehrmacht's strengths throughout the war. Since 1939, captured tanks were routinely sent to Kummersdorf, proving grounds south of Berlin, where they underwent comprehensive testing. Crews would drive them, fire their weapons, measure their performance characteristics. Engineers would disassemble engines, analyze armor composition, and study manufacturing techniques. The intelligence gathered informed German tactical doctrine, influenced weapon development, and occasionally led to direct adoption of enemy equipment into German service. The pattern had been consistent across all theaters. Captured Soviet T-34 seconds were so thoroughly evaluated that German engineers developed the Panther partly in response to the T-34's sloped armor and mobility. Captured British Matilda tanks were tested so extensively that Germans understood their strengths and weaknesses better than some British crews. When American Shermans first appeared in North Africa in 1942, Wehrmacht forces made extraordinary efforts to capture intact examples. The Sherman, designated as War Daddy II, captured from the 1st Armoured Division near Spitla, Tunisia, on February 22, 1943, was shipped to Germany aboard a transport vessel that dodged Allied submarines specifically to deliver this intelligence prize. At Kummersdorf, German test crews spent weeks driving War Daddy II, firing its 75mm gun, measuring its armor protection, and analyzing its Ford GAA engine. The evaluation was methodical and thorough. Test drivers noted the Sherman's superior mechanical reliability compared to German tanks. Gunners appreciated the power traverse and gun stabilization, features German tanks lacked. Engineers measured the armor 63mm on the glacis at 47 degrees, equivalent to approximately 90mm of vertical armor, and calculated penetration requirements. The intelligence informed German anti-tank weapon development and tactical training. When German tank crews faced Shermans in Italy and France, they did so with a comprehensive understanding of the enemy machine's capabilities and vulnerabilities. This systematic evaluation process represented German military professionalism at its finest. It was methodical, scientific, and effective. It provided German forces with crucial intelligence advantages throughout the war's middle years. But by early 1945, the infrastructure supporting this process was collapsing. Kummersdorf proving grounds had been evacuated in January as Soviet forces approached Berlin. Testing facilities were dispersed to locations throughout Germany, but the chaos of the Reich's final months made coordinated evaluation nearly impossible. When the Pershing appeared, Germany lacked the time, resources, and institutional capacity to conduct the evaluation that might have revealed its full capabilities. The few German encounters with Pershings in combat were too brief and too one-sided to generate useful tactical intelligence. At Remagen on March 7, 1945, 4 Pershings from 9th Armoured Division provided fire support during the famous capture of the Ludendorff Bridge over the Rhine. German defenders, focused on trying to destroy the bridge before American forces could secure it, barely registered the new tank type among the chaos of the assault. Those German soldiers who did notice the Pershing's distinctive silhouettes were typically killed or captured before they could report their observations. At Dessau on April 21, 1945, one of the war's final tank versus tank engagements demonstrated the Pershing's combat effectiveness while simultaneously illustrating why German forces never achieved comprehensive understanding. The Super Pershing, a specially modified T-26E4 mounting an enhanced 90mm gun with extra armor plates welded to the glacis and mantlet, encountered German armor in street fighting near the junction of the Mulde and Elbe rivers. The engagement sequence, reconstructed from American after-action reports, reveals the encounter's lopsided nature. Commander First Lieutenant John Irwin and Gunner Corporal William McVeigh, operating the sole Super Pershing deployed to Europe, identified a German tank, possibly a Jagd Panther tank destroyer, at approximately 1,500 yards range. The Super Pershing's enhanced gun, with its longer barrel and improved ammunition, fired first. The German vehicle, whatever its exact type, was destroyed with a single shot. Minutes later, another German tank appeared. McVeigh fired again. Another kill. A third German tank, this one identified as a Panther, attempted to maneuver into firing position. McVeigh's shot disabled the Panther's drive sprocket and penetrated the side armor. The tank burned. The entire engagement lasted perhaps 3 minutes. From the German perspective, the encounter offered no opportunity for analysis. 3 tanks destroyed in rapid succession by an unknown American weapon firing from concealed positions. The surviving crew members, those who escaped the burning vehicles, were immediately captured by advancing American infantry. They never returned to German lines to report what they'd faced. The engagement added to the growing catalogue of inexplicable German armor losses in the Reich's final weeks, but it contributed nothing to German understanding of American tank development. What German tank crews never fully grasped was the broader industrial and technological context the Pershing represented. Even if they had captured a Pershing intact, even if they had conducted a complete evaluation, the intelligence would have been devastating to morale rather than useful for tactical adaptation. The Pershing wasn't just a better tank, it was evidence that American engineering had achieved parity with German designs while maintaining overwhelming production advantages Germany could never match. The production statistics told a story. German commanders carefully avoided sharing with frontline troops. By April 1945, American tank production facilities covered over 50 million square feet of factory space distributed across 22 states. The Detroit tank arsenal alone, a single facility, could produce more tanks per month than most German manufacturing complexes. Fisher Body Division, which had been producing automobiles until 1942, had retooled for tank production in months, and was now manufacturing Pershings alongside continued Sherman production. This industrial flexibility was something German industry never achieved. The numbers were staggering. Total Pershing production reached 2,212 tanks by October 1945, despite production beginning only in November 1944. Compare this to German heavy tank production. Across the entire war, 1,347 Tiger is produced between August 1942 and August 1944, and 492 Tiger IIs produced between January 1944 and March 1945. The Americans had built more Pershings in less than a year than Germany built Tigers in 3 years. And Sherman production continued simultaneously, approximately 49,000 M. 4 Shermans were manufactured between 1942 and 1945. The production capacity extended beyond simple numbers. American factories incorporated assembly line techniques perfected in automobile manufacturing. Worker training programs could take inexperienced personnel and convert them to skilled tank assemblers in weeks. Component standardization meant that parts were interchangeable between vehicles, simplifying maintenance and repair. The logistical infrastructure supporting American armored forces meant that damaged tanks could be recovered, repaired, and returned to service in days. German armored forces, by contrast, often abandoned damaged tanks because recovery vehicles and spare parts were unavailable. The technological pipeline behind the Pershing revealed even more troubling implications for German forces. The M26 wasn't the endpoint of American heavy tank development, it was the beginning. The T-26E4 Super Pershing, with its enhanced 90mm gun, existed in 25 production examples by war's end. The T-26E5, featuring increased armor up to 279mm thick, existed in 27 prototypes. Beyond these, American engineers were developing the T-29 heavy tank, mounting a 105mm gun, the T-30 with a 155mm gun, and the T-34 with a 120mm gun. These development programs represented American engineering accelerating past German capabilities while the Reich collapsed. German intelligence officers who analyzed American tank production, those few still functioning in April 1945, faced an impossible task. How could they explain to frontline troops that American industry had not only caught up to German technology, but had potentially surpassed it? How could they maintain fighting spirit when the mathematical certainty of German technical superiority was revealed as temporary advantage rather than permanent condition? The psychological implications were more devastating than the tactical ones. The cognitive dissonance created by encountering Pershings was particularly severe for Waffen-SS tank crews, who had been selected partly for ideological reliability. These men had accepted Nazi racial theory as fundamental truth. The ideology taught that Germanic peoples were racially superior, that their technological and cultural achievements reflected inherent biological advantages. The corollary was that inferior races, particularly the mongrel Americans with their mixed population, could never match German engineering excellence. This worldview had been reinforced by 3 years of battlefield experience, where German tanks were, demonstrably, superior to Allied designs. The Pershing's appearance challenged this ideological foundation directly. If Americans depicted in Nazi propaganda as racially inferior, culturally decadent, industrially incompetent, could produce a tank equal or superior to German designs, what did that imply about racial superiority theories? The question was never explicitly articulated in surviving German documents, but its implications permeated the psychological collapse of German armored forces in the war's final weeks. German tank crew morale, which had remained remarkably resilient through 1944 despite catastrophic strategic defeats, began deteriorating rapidly in early 1945. After-action reports from American forces noted increasing instances of German tank crews abandoning undamaged vehicles, surrendering without fighting, or showing reduced tactical aggression. Multiple factors contributed to this collapse: fuel shortages, ammunition scarcity, air supremacy, isolation from infantry support. But the appearance of American heavy tanks added a crucial psychological element. The last remaining source of German battlefield confidence, technological superiority in armor, was revealed as an illusion. A captured German tank commander, interviewed by American intelligence officers in late April 1945, provided insight into this psychological state. Oberfahrenrich Karl Steiner, commander of a Panther from Panzer Regiment 26, had been fighting since France in 1940. His tank had been destroyed by what he described as a heavy American tank with a very long gun near Kassel on April 4. Steiner's interview, preserved in American archives, reveals the bewilderment of German tankers encountering unexpected American firepower. We had positioned our Panther in a strong defensive location, hull down with good fields of fire, Steiner reported through an interpreter. We had destroyed 2 Shermans at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. Standard engagement, we were confident. Then something else appeared. The turret was enormous. The gun was much longer than a Sherman's. My gunner, Unteroffizier Braun, said, "That's not a Sherman." Before we could fully identify it, it fired. 1 shot. The penetration was complete. The round went through our frontal armor, something that had never happened before. It killed Braun instantly and wounded 2 others. We evacuated immediately. The interviewer asked what Steiner had thought he was facing. His response was telling, "I did not know. We had no training for this tank type. The intelligence briefings never mentioned it. In my mind, I wondered if it was a Soviet tank somehow transferred to the Western Front. The Americans weren't supposed to have such weapons. That was the most disturbing part, not just that we were hit, but that we faced something we didn't know existed. It made me question what else we didn't know. If American industry could produce such tanks in secret, what else were we wrong about?" This last question, what else were we wrong about, encapsulated the broader psychological crisis affecting German tank crews in April 1945. The Pershing represented more than a tactical threat. It was evidence of comprehensive intelligence failure, of industrial capacity that exceeded German estimates, of American engineering capability that contradicted Nazi propaganda. The realization that American democracy could match or exceed German totalitarianism in military-industrial production struck at the ideological foundations sustaining German resistance. The Battle of the Ruhr Pocket in April 1945 demonstrated the cumulative effect of these psychological factors combined with material conditions. Approximately 325,000 German troops were encircled in a massive pocket east of the Rhine River. Among these forces were remnants of panzer divisions that had fought since the war's beginning, veteran crews, with years of combat experience operating Panthers, Tigers, and assault guns. By all traditional military logic, these forces should have fought desperately to break out, or at least inflict maximum casualties before inevitable defeat. Instead, German resistance in the Ruhr Pocket collapsed with startling rapidity. American forces reported encountering abandoned German tanks, some with minimal damage, others completely undamaged with fuel still in their tanks. Tank crews surrendered in groups, often with their vehicles intact. The resistance that did occur was sporadic and disorganized. When American intelligence officers interviewed the prisoners, attempting to understand the rapid collapse, common themes emerged. Fuel shortages were cited frequently. Tanks without fuel were useless regardless of crew morale. Ammunition scarcity was mentioned, particularly for the specialized rounds needed for Tankmen guns. Air attacks were devastating. German tanks couldn't move without being spotted and attacked by American fighter bombers. But alongside these material factors, prisoners repeatedly mentioned psychological elements. They spoke of feeling outmatched, of facing enemies with unlimited resources, of fighting with equipment they no longer believed was superior. Several prisoners specifically mentioned encountering American tanks they couldn't identify, tanks with guns more powerful than expected, tanks that defeated Panthers and Tigers. These reports reveal that the Pershing's psychological impact far exceeded its statistical combat presence. Only about 20 Pershings saw actual combat in World War II. Perhaps another 100 were in Europe by May 1945, though most never engaged enemy forces. The statistical impact was minimal. These few tanks destroyed perhaps dozens of German vehicles at most. But the knowledge that Americans possessed heavy tanks spread through German forces via radio intercepts, prisoner reports, and frontline observations. The psychological impact was disproportionate to the tactical impact. The phenomenon paralleled, in reverse, the Tiger fever that had afflicted American tank crews earlier in the war, where American crews had overestimated Tiger presence and capabilities, seeing Tigers where only Panzer IVs existed. German crews by April 1945 were attributing many Allied tank kills to heavy American tanks, whether Pershings were actually present or not. Any powerful hit, any unexpected penetration, any engagement where a German tank was destroyed by seemingly impossible fire became attributed to the mysterious American heavy tanks. The uncertainty itself was psychologically corrosive. What might German evaluation of a captured Pershing have revealed had the opportunity existed? Based on German testing procedures applied to other Allied tanks, we can reconstruct the likely analysis. German test crews would have immediately recognized the 90mm gun as the weapon previously encountered on American M26 tank destroyers. They would have measured its characteristics: barrel length of 4.5 meters, muzzle velocity of 853 meters per second for standard armor-piercing rounds. They would have calculated penetration values and compared them to German armor standards. The conclusion would have been sobering: this gun could penetrate any German tank's frontal armor at typical combat ranges. The armor evaluation would have provided mixed results from a German perspective. The Pershing's frontal protection, 102mm at 46 degrees on the glacis, 114mm on the turret face, was formidable, but not exceptional by German heavy tank standards. The Tiger II's frontal armor of 150mm at 50 degrees provided superior protection, but German testers would have noted the Pershing's design philosophy: adequate protection, combined with superior firepower and acceptable mobility. This balanced approach contrasted with German emphasis on maximum armor protection, often at the expense of mobility and mechanical reliability. The engine and transmission testing would have revealed perhaps the most significant lesson. The Ford GAF engine, while not exceptionally powerful at 500 horsepower, was reliable and used readily available components. German testers, accustomed to complex German engines requiring specialized maintenance, would have appreciated the American approach. The transmission, a Torquematic automatic system, provided easier operation than German manual transmissions. The overall mechanical package prioritized reliability and ease of maintenance over ultimate performance, a distinctly American engineering philosophy that German designers had often dismissed, but which proved devastatingly effective in sustained operations. The fire control systems would have impressed German evaluators. The gyro-stabilized gun mounting, allowing firing while moving, represented technology German tanks lacked. The optical sights, while not superior to German optics, were combined with ranging systems that simplified gunnery. The Americans had integrated multiple small advantages into a cohesive system optimized for actual combat conditions rather than theoretical maximum performance. This systems integration approach was characteristic of American engineering, but often undervalued by German designers focused on individual component excellence. The manufacturing quality would have provided the most psychologically devastating revelation. German testers examining a Pershing's construction would have seen welding quality, casting precision, and component finishing that matched or exceeded German standards. The castings turret, hull front, gun mantlet showed sophisticated metallurgy and production techniques. The realization that American industry could mass-produce such quality would have shattered assumptions about American manufacturing capability. Germany had dismissed American industry as capable of quantity, but not quality. The Pershing proved both were achievable simultaneously. The final irony of the Pershing story was that German tank development had actually produced designs that might have maintained German technical superiority, but these existed only as prototypes or paper projects when the war ended. The Panther II program, intended to create an improved Panther with better armor layout and upgraded components, produced only a single prototype by war's end. The E-Series standardized tank designs E50 and E75 represented advanced engineering that might have exceeded the Pershing's capabilities, but they never progressed beyond design studies and component testing. The Maus Super Heavy tank, weighing 188 tons and mounting a 128mm gun, represented German heavy tank thinking taken to an extreme. 2 prototypes were built. One was partially completed when Soviet forces overran the testing facility at Kummersdorf in April 1945. The massive vehicle, theoretically invincible in direct combat, was also nearly immobile, consumed fuel at rates that made operational deployment impossible, and was too heavy for any bridge in Europe. It embodied the fundamental flaw in late-war German tank development, the pursuit of technical perfection without regard for practical operational requirements. This contrast, American pragmatism versus German perfectionism, defined the broader divergence in tank philosophy. Germans sought individual technical superiority in each vehicle. Americans sought sufficient quality in massive quantities, supported by industrial and logistical systems, ensuring sustained operations. When Americans achieved technical parity with the Pershing while maintaining production and logistical superiority, German resistance became mathematically impossible. The few German tank crews who grasped this broader picture understood that the war was lost regardless of individual battlefield outcomes. Hauptmann Werner Wolf, a company commander in Panzer Regiment 33, captured near Magdeburg on April 18, 1945, articulated this understanding in his interrogation. Wolf had commanded Panthers since Kursk in 1943 and had survived 2 years of retreating warfare. His perspective, preserved in American intelligence archives, reveals the bitter clarity of professional soldiers watching their cause collapse. I saw one of your new heavy tanks near Halle. We engaged it at 800 meters. Our shot struck the turret but did not penetrate. The American tank returned fire. One shot destroyed my Panther. The armor penetration was complete. At that moment, I understood that Germany had lost not just this battle but the entire technological race. If America could build such tanks, and if you had them in numbers we hadn't known about, then everything we'd been told about American industrial incompetence was false. That was the most demoralizing realization, not that we were losing, we already knew that, but that we had been fundamentally wrong about our enemy's capabilities. It made me question everything else we'd been told, about the war, about why we were fighting, about what we were fighting for. Wolf's statement captures the cascading psychological collapse. The Pershing contributed to not through overwhelming combat presence, but through its existence as evidence of broader realities German propaganda had denied. The hunter had become hunted, not just on individual battlefields, but in the broader contest of industrial and technological development that ultimately determined the war's outcome. By late April 1945, approximately 185 Pershings had reached Europe, though most never saw combat. The war was ending too rapidly for proper deployment. German resistance was collapsing across the Western Front. American armored spearheads were advancing dozens of miles per day against minimal opposition. The desperate tank versus tank encounters that had characterized fighting in France and Belgium had largely ceased. German tank crews, those who hadn't surrendered or been killed, were retreating eastward, hoping to surrender to Americans rather than Soviets, or simply abandoning their vehicles as fuel was exhausted. The final verified engagement between a Pershing and German armour occurred on April 24 near Dessau, the same sector where the Super Pershing had fought 3 days earlier. A standard M26 from 3rd Armoured Division encountered a Panzer IV attempting to withdraw across a bridge. The engagement was brief and one-sided. The Pershing fired at an approximately 600 meters range. The Panzer IV, with its 80 millimeters of frontal armour, had no chance. The penetration was complete. The German crew evacuated. 3 days later, Germany surrendered. In the war's final accounting, the Pershing's combat record was limited but symbolically important. The approximately 20 tanks that saw sustained combat destroyed perhaps 40 to 50 German armoured vehicles. Exact numbers are impossible to verify given the chaos of the Reich's collapse. The kill ratio was favourable, but not exceptional. What mattered wasn't the statistical impact, but the psychological and symbolic implications. American industrial democracy had produced a heavy tank equal or superior to Germany's best, while the war was still being fought. The technological superiority German forces had relied upon for morale and tactical confidence was revealed as temporary advantage rather than permanent condition. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.